It's all about money. It's all about business.
There's plenty of books, masses of stuff out there in terms of the end product and design, but how those ingredients work together in real life stories.
How to bring the brand to life, not just in terms of graphic design. If you think you need a logo, this is not the podcast for you.
Number one, how does brand align with the inside of the organisation? How do you build culture? Okay, how do you bring people along with you? Because if you don't have people in your business with you, you've got a dysfunctional operation.
We're not scared to go and ruffle some feathers. In fact, we'd probably like to, cause a bit of a ripple here.
For example, in the previous leader of the Liberal Party, he had a brand problem.
And I used to be a brand marketer for one of the big international companies, and we used to hate what we called retail brands. Richard was one of the masterminds behind the Olympic brand in Sydney.
And the tears and the effort and the frustration and the agony and the pain of creating something.
I'm really looking forward to the guests coming up. Some of them are going to be a bit controversial, but most of all, give you those action points to help your business. Hi, welcome to Brandr. I'm Roy Tavenor, and we're going to be talking about brands and businesses and how brands make businesses successful. If you're not convinced about that, just figure this out for a moment. On Amazon, which is probably the biggest marketplace, there's 350 million products, somewhere between 500,000 and 2 million brands. But Apple, which we all know so well, has been valued at $500 billion. This is serious. It's all about money. It's all about business. And we're going to show you, by interviewing interesting people, talking about great brands, how the connection between brand and business success actually works.
Hi, I'm Richard Henderson. I'm a brand identity strategist, and I work across sectors to help organisations find clarity and connection through creative brand outcomes. We're going to dive into the big conversations leaders are having or should be having about brand. As Roy mentioned, those brands that we talked about have huge value, and we're going to explore through three essential questions. The first one is, how does brand align people inside the organisation and build culture and belief? The second question we're going to talk about is, how does it shape how you're being seen from the outside, creating desire? And thirdly, how do you keep up with and be relevant in a market that never stands still? It's about having purpose that matters. So you might well be asking, how does Roy and I know each other? Well, we've been colleagues, and we've also been client and consultant. Roy is a thinker and also a very sharp businessman. I'm a creative guy and spent my whole life in taking business theories, business strategies, and converting them into compelling creative outcomes.
So, Richard, when I first met you, it was the work that you were doing and the team that you had formed and your partners in the business that actually were working at a level that was way, way above what I had expected. I was running the Myer brand at the time. I was the head of marketing, and the Myer brand's been around forever. It's had its ups and downs, and we were at a point in time when the Myer brand really needed some attention. It hadn't moved with the times. And your team, of which you were part, were working on brands that, for me, as a newcomer, were actually right up there. We're talking about brands like Telstra, brands like Crown, brands like Sydney Olympics, and countless others. And I didn't really associate that with your agency until I met you. And I'm suddenly thinking, well, okay, these are the guys I think they could do something for Myer. If that's the quality of the work and that's the quality of the minds behind it, I want them on Myer. And that's how we got to know each other, and we had a lot of fun at the time. You did some amazing work on things like Myer Electric, Myer Sport, etc. And that was a really seminal time for me to learn about brand from an agency like yours. At the time, you were in your prime. You're at the top of the tree, literally, in terms of being a branding guy in this country. And, you came in and saw me. What did you think about Myer?
Well,
You weren't very complimentary.
well, Myer was in trouble, as you know, in
Yes.
those days. This is some years back. And the interesting thing about Roy, which I've always so admired, is that Roy was on the other side of the desk, if you like. Roy was in the marketing and the strategy side for Myer. And we worked together, as I said before, because of the chemistry, and Roy understood the power of brand. And so we worked together very much in harmony with the team. I only was one member. I was the design director of the team that we had at the time. And so we had some amazing creative people, young people who came in and actually also basically had the opportunity to do something really extraordinary, which they did. So I was really the conductor, if you like, of that, with my other partner, who also was at the front of our organisation. But then the other thing about you, Roy, which is extraordinary and probably a very interesting combination for those out there that are listening to this, is that Roy then went to the other side and left Myer and started a business with two other creative partners. And so he brought the thinking stage, the strategic side of things, to another small business, which is essentially a startup. And so you created this new business. And since that time, Roy, you and I have had conversations. We've worked together on certain things. We've discussed things, particularly we've discussed Asia. You're in Vietnam now, and you have an associated business in the United States. I'm a global thinker, and I'm also in China. And this combination of ourselves moving up on a river in two different canoes, but forging this journey has been such a fulfilling a combination of two people on a journey in a tough marketplace, ups and downs, and sharing that has been an absolute joy. And now we're together on this show discussing and taking our wisdom and our thinking, our learnings, and also working with teams of people, teams of creative, leading teams of creative people, giving creative people the opportunity to actually create, obviously, design and fulfill their potential, which I think is our mantra for our teams, to fulfill their potential, it still remains as exciting now as it was 20 years ago.
I think the journey's also been parallel but slightly different, that my practice is all about creating the customer experience. We've got architects, we've got interior designers, and we have brand people. You're probably a pure branding guy, but the collective experience is actually how to bring the brand to life, not just in terms of graphic design. So again, if you think you need a logo, this is not the podcast for you, I promise you. If you think you need a brand idea, creativity, to create value within the business, to align all your team members, to make it happen, there's a design stage to it, but there's also the experiential side of it. So again, all of these things that we've learned have resulted in us inviting some interesting guests. So we're not going to be talking too much about us anymore. We just want you to know who we are, that we think we have enough knowledge about the industry to help you, but it's actually the value of the people we're going to interview and the brands that we're going to explore, and probably that whole thing of lifting the lid and understanding what went on behind the scenes. That's going to make it an interesting series.
And just to segue from that, Roy, to also not to talk about us, but to talk about how we as two businesses are evolving for the marketplace as well. So that we're now in a remote world. In the olden days, we might have had a studio of 10, 20, 30 people, as we did when we did the Olympics. But today now, we're in a remote environment. I lead teams of I network. I bring specialists in. I bring the best you can possibly have to the project that you need, not from an internal point of view, from an external point of view. So you've got animators, you've got signage people, you've got packaging people, you've got corporate people, etc., coming together as experts in a team. And that's another way of a business evolving, like other businesses are evolving as well. And that's also a fascinating part of how do you manage that in a contemporary marketplace, but also running a business that demands clients and demands income.
And just to summarise all of that, back to you being the viewer, what we're going to be really focusing on is how do you harness all of those ideas? How do you actually make your business more successful by learning from this series? It's not about just listening to the story. It's about executing one takeout in every podcast back into your company.
That idea of, you mentioned the word story, Roy. These are just stories captured in a short session just stories of our journey, stories of our clients' journeys as well, how they use brand to differentiate themselves, how they use brand to be successful, how did they use brand to maintain relevance in an ever-changing marketplace.
We also thought that rather than listening to us talking, this whole series is based on interviewing really interesting guests. So we've actually worked really hard to bring a series to you with different kinds of people, different levels. So Richard, just to give you an example, this is just one, if you don't mind me, complimenting you on some of your background, Richard. Richard was one of the masterminds behind the Olympic brand in Sydney. That's something that he's gained pretty much international recognition for. And, so we go from that. On the other hand, in my practice, I've worked for a one-man charity. And in fact, he will be a guest in the upcoming series where it's a great story where brand can actually change a community. So we're going to bring you guests who are not necessarily business people all the time. Sometimes they might be charities, sometimes they might be individuals. But the common theme is brand worked for them. And I think, Richard, you said it when we spoke about this series over the previous months. We felt that there was a lot about branding that people didn't really know behind the scenes. So to some degree, what we want to do is lift the hood. So, okay, we're interested in this brand. We've got a fascinating guest, and we're going to try and get them to open up and really tell us what happened in the back room. You only get to see the stuff in the marketplace, but I'm really interested in the backstory.
Yeah, I think, Roy, that there's plenty of books on strategy, there's plenty of books, masses of stuff out there in terms of the end product and design. But how do those ingredients work together in real life stories? And we've been fortunate, both of us, to be in boardrooms, be in major competitive environments where we're pitching, etc., and then we're delivering work through a synergy of straight thinking and creativity, and then creativity and thinking, and then deliverables. And that's something which is quite rare to actually be able to listen to. But we are going to give you the back end of how the whole process has worked and what were the pressures and worries and fears and most importantly, vulnerability for serious business people about how they're going to manage their brand and how they're going to be successful in an ever-changing marketplace. So the three things that we're going to uncover and go through here is, number one, how does brand align with the inside of the organisation? How do you build culture? Okay, how do you bring people along with you? Because if you don't have people in your business with you, you've got a dysfunctional operation. That's the first thing. So then secondly, how does brand shape how you're seen from the outside? How do you create the differential? I mean, Roy mentioned before about the billions of people that go to Amazon and the number of products on Amazon. How do you differentiate? That's just from a retail point of view. But how do you differentiate in the professional businesses? How do you differentiate yourself in all sorts of industries from the outside? How your customer and the audiences see you. And the third point, of course, which is the most critical, and I think this is where probably is a good reminder or call out to businesses, is how do you remain relevant? You cannot stand still. Roy mentioned something to me before about a lot of people see brand like a line of people walking down the parade. It's fixed. But in actual fact, that parade is always moving, and those people are moving through from a lifestyle to desire to etc. of what they're doing in the market. How do you remain relevant? One of the great examples of being relevant is shopping centres. They must remain relevant to attract the customers. They must have the right products in there for the customers. Exactly the same for brand.
Probably also good to debunk a couple of myths. Now, we both run design companies, right? We sort of compete a little bit, but slightly different focuses. But a lot of people think brand is about design. It's certainly an important part of it. But if you come back to your point about internal culture and alignment, unless the people in your company, in your business, actually believe in the brand and actually embrace it as almost a mantra, and it almost, as we said before, a culture. How can you tell the consumer about it? Because if you're confused, sure as hell you're going to confuse the consumer. So when we talk about brand alignment, it's actually more about psychology. It's about getting your team members and getting the organisation and the leaders and the founders. And we all know great examples where you just know that that particular brand understands their brand.
I think on that, Roy, that understanding comes from a conversion of that, where I talk about winning hearts and minds. You mentioned Apple before. Yeah. Well, Apple has got a technology system. There are other companies that have a technology system. But why do people love Apple? There's a certain aspect, there's an allure about Apple. There's an allure of emotional connection about Apple that is so important and so critical. So combining the strategy, because you've got to start from a strategic platform. A designer starts from that. A designer is not an artist. A designer is solving complex problems. That's what a brand designer does. Then you take that strategy and that thinking, and then you convert it, which is really the art and the science of taking that and creating something that is so memorable and so distinctive and so loved by the heart that it actually hits the memory and therefore becomes very, very valuable.
And let's talk a bit about you, the audience for Brandr. We're targeting business people, we're targeting entrepreneurs, people that actually run organisations, people that are founding organisations. And so what do you do the first step? Most companies think they look up and, go and Google an agency or look at the design awards and pick a creative agency. It's the wrong step. I run a creative agency and I always say to clients, step one, it's about, do you understand your brand? Are you all aligned with this brand? So if you're not happy that you are, don't call an agency who's going to design a logo for you. You're probably better off to call a brand thinker to help you think it through. So, this is all about helping you. If you're listening and watching this podcast, how can you get it working for you? So step one, don't just pick up the phone and phone a creative agency if you don't know and you're not feeling comfortable about your brand alignment. The second part, though, is when you do need design. And you know what? We're in the age of Canva. Why on earth would you need a brand agency to design a logo? You can design it yourself. And we see so much of that. And that's when you come back to Amazon. 2 million brands. 1.999 million of them just get ignored. They're just logos. They don't really have anything more to say than just a particular piece of design. So getting it out there and getting it into the market, Richard, that's that's one of your strongest points, that you've been both a brand thinker and you'll get the phone call when somebody's confused about their brand. And then they'll ask you to design it. How do you play that role? It's actually two hats that you're wearing there. How does that work for you?
Well, I think the art, it's the art and the science, it's the understanding of the strategy, the basis of it. I always work from a summary basis of a strategy program, and then it's actually how can you bring something, imagination, into that theory or that structure, that linear thinking, and convert it into something which is now lateral. Okay, so the creativity and the imagination is kicked in. I'm such a big advocate for creativity adding value to the message. Anyone can actually sort of lay something out, but it's how do you organise the messages in a way that is compelling, but also changes the perception of the mind about what that actual message is being sent to you. It's such a critical connection. There's a very interesting thing to think about, even when you're looking at this video. There's the screen, and there's the distance between the screen or the image and your own mind. That open space, that no brand land, if you like, is there. That's where the power of imagination and creativity catch your eye, make you consider, potentially make you change course. That's the power.
We're going to invite you, the audience, to tell us what you want to hear. We want it to be really engaging and interactive. So instead of us saying, we've got these brands that we like, there'll be a lot of marketing, a lot of ways to communicate with us via the podcast. And we're going to invite you, the audience, to tell us what you want to hear, what you want to know, so that it's not just a one-sided conversation.
And just to add to that, it's not often that we can talk to two people like ourselves who've been there, who've been in the business for a number of years, decades, and the wisdom that we've gathered, mainly from our clients and the problems they've they've faced, and the vulnerability of our clients, which I mentioned before. I mean, Roy and I have both been in the boardroom. We're both competing with business against potentially other agencies, etc. But in the boardroom, to talk to leaders of businesses about how do they maintain relevance in an ever-changing marketplace. And also, from my point of view, the great thing of talking with Roy, we come from two sides of the coin, the same coin, if you like. It's actually how do you take design and creativity and reimagine. Can you just, to give that into perspective, I talk about the tyranny of the white page. I mention the white page because it's not a white screen for me. It's the page. It's the hand to the mind, to the power of imagination. And then how do you take that and then obviously go into technology? We're in a technology world nowadays, so everything has to convert into technology. But that principle of where do you start, and the anxiety for a creative person about how do you do that, because every creative person wants to do their best. So how do you bring new ideas? How do you match up the idea with the structure which you're working off? Because a creative person works from a framework, which is the strategy, the end goal idea, which is the end business ambition. How do you then take that and visualize it? And there is a quote by Rollo May, a psychologist, has said, "Tears of joy." And the tears and the effort and the frustration and the agony and the pain of creating something and being satisfied with it, by the way, and then presenting it in that moment of we call it in the business the 3 meters between the outside of the boardroom and the inside of the boardroom, and taking a concept into the board or the decision maker and discussing why this is the correct approach. And the most fascinating thing that happens is, and we all know this, when we see something or feel something or taste something or hear something that actually resonates with us, all our agendas, all the fears and worries fall away as we say, "I love that." And that is the sort of the moment, the elixir of being in the creative world. And to have, it's also love that from the linear, the structure, the strategist, the thinker, that they have worked together. So we've got this yin-yang of an outcome that no one knew we were going to go to before we started. That's the most fascinating thing about what we do. And so we're going to share that passion with other people in our business and our clients to actually sort of give you some insight, which is these are real live insights of experiences we both had.
I think I'd probably invite you then to follow this series. Brandr is a new concept for us. It's got a lot of material that we want to expose to you and interesting guests. At the end, probably if I can make one little promise, let's call it the Brandr promise. So we're going to be listening and interviewing guests, and you're going to hear a lot of stuff. So what we're going to try and do at the end of each podcast is give you one takeout, just one point out of that particular conversation with whatever guest it is, whichever brand it is. And that takeout is something that will be something you could act on. So if you have a problem with your brand, we'll give you the first action point, something that's actionable and something that's going to do something for your business. So, Richard, I'm really looking forward to the guests coming up. Going to be some interesting topics. Some of them are going to be a bit controversial, but I promise you that we'll do our best to entertain you and certainly bring you great guests, but most of all, give you those action points, something you can take away from every session to help your business.